Developers, we're going to continue inside of the flow control folder, going to the Truthy file to discuss Truthy and Falsey. Now, Truthy, I'm packaging this up here with flow control if statements, with us going left and going right based on the evaluation of expression, because we leverage Truthy and Falsey values often in when we do simple things like if statements. So let's discuss what Truthy and Falsey is. So first, let's just see here. I'm going to declare a variable called is friend. So here's my friend, and the value is true. So if I write an if statement around is friend, I am going to see that if that value is true, we're going to write this out. Is true. And then the if else part, otherwise there's nothing else to check, is not friend. I'm just going to put not friend. I'm going to leave that a little easier to read when we get our console fired up. I'm going to hide my file explorer, open up my live server so that we can see the console log statement fire up. Control Shift I to open up my console, and let me move this over to the left. All right. So here in the console, is friend is true. That's not unexpected. And this is easy to wrap our heads around relatively, because this is, after all, is friend is a Boolean. And we know that the if statement wants to evaluate a Boolean expression, an expression that would be true. If it's true, it goes into the code block. Now, here's the other thing about now the if statement is if you feed it something that is not a Boolean, right? So let's just actually come back and say, hey, here I have an object. It doesn't matter what's inside this object. It is an object. If I said, hey, if Alex, so what is Alex? Alex is an object. But what ends up happening is that through the process of type coercion, which is to basically take an object and massage it or convert it, cast it into another object, here type coercion is going to try to get it and cast it into true or false. So it doesn't change the value of Alex from being an object. If we look at the type of Alex here, it's still an object. And here is Alex. It's an empty object. But for this expression here, it gets evaluated as if it was true or truthy. So the object, as long as it is an object, comes in as truthy. Var Bob, let's just say var Bob is actually not known. I have yet to assign a value to it that is not null or not undefined. If we check out Bob, if we do the if statement around Bob, we're going to see that Bob is not a friend, right? So here is something that is not truthy. I'm going to now change this to not truthy. And we're going to leave this now because I've deviated from my example. And so this is truthy, right? So not necessarily true, a true value, but it gets evaluated as if it was true. It behaves as if it was true. Hence the word truthy. Bob is not truthy. Var, we're going to declare now Chris, and we're going to leave Chris as undefined. Let's see what happens with Chris. Chris ends up being as undefined. It's not truthy. And so if it's not truthy, it actually, what we refer to it as, this is falsy. Well, it's not truthy. We'll leave it as not truthy. You could say, because I want to talk about it later. Is it falsy, right? Maybe falsy, right? Because I just want to drive the distinction. Just because it doesn't go into true doesn't make it falsy, although in most instances it will. So Chris is not truthy. Bob is not truthy. Alex, again, let's go see what Alex is. If I put if Alex is an object and it comes back as is truthy. How about if I have another type of object that we're familiar with? Friends. Friends is an array. Is friends going to be truthy? Friends is truthy, right? So here's friends, it's truthy. One more time, this is truthy. How about if I had a number? Let's just say age, again, a number to talk about. If age, this is truthy. Now, what if the age was embedded inside of Alex? And if I said if Alex.age, then this comes back as truthy, because after all, we're simply evaluating age, right? We're only evaluating age, an integer that happens to be inside of this reference type object called Alex, right? It's still a number. So numbers are going to come back truthy. Valid objects, whether it's an array or an object, going to come back truthy. Obviously, the value of true is truthy. These two guys, let me start separating them. These two guys here, null and undefined, are not truthy, right? So here, let's just say these are truthy, and then these are false or falsey. Let's continue to explore what things are going to be yielded as truthy or falsey. We have age, we have a number. Oh, this is the wonderful thing. How about my name? So let's just see my name here. I'm going to check out if my name, I've hit save now, and let's see my name. So when my name comes back, my name actually look, my name is not truthy, it's maybe falsey, right? So, and here is my name, because it's undefined. So as is, the value of my name is undefined. So because we already know that undefined is not truthy, then it becomes falsey. This is where you're going to get stuck on. This is something to get tripped up on. My name now is an empty string. Okay? My name is an empty string. Here it is. My name is an empty string. Empty strings, even though they are a thing. So I can say my name dot length. Even though it is an actual object, it is an empty string. So it does exist, right? The type of my name is a string. Even though it's a string, because it's an empty string, it becomes falsey. So this is very different than, let's just say, if I put a space there. So now if I put a space there, we're going to see that this now becomes truthy. Again, the type of my name is a string. The length of my name is now 1. Because there's just an empty space in there, it gives that empty string some value. Now, that comes in handy in some instances when you're trying to read user input and you're trying to determine if the user put any values in it. Depending on the type of user control that you're going to be working on, sometimes when the user inputs something, you're going to get an empty string, or you're going to get null, or you're going to get undefined. And either one of those situations, right, null and undefined, and then empty string, these yield falsey. So it's really important these yield falsey. And when you're reading input from a user, it's convenient that the empty string comes back as the null and undefined, because it kind of allows you to write logic based upon whether or not the user provided input. For example, let me give this user input is empty string, and because the user input is an empty string, we're going to say if the user provided input, right? We can say here, we're going to say here again, just for illustrative purposes, how we would use this in our logic. We would say if user input, the user provided input, and in our console log, let me leave this alone for a second. The user did not provide input. So here's an empty string. The user did not provide input. As soon as I put anything in there, I hit save, the user provided input. So we can do logic using our if statement, leveraging the fact that an empty string comes back as falsey. Okay, so here again, user input is going to be empty, And so then that reads as falsey. I don't go in here. I actually go inside of my console log statement that says, hey, I did not provide any input. So the falsey is going to be the empty string. Great. Let me take this away. The empty string, again, is falsey. My name is undefined. This actually comes back as undefined over here. We have age is 0. Now, let's do something else now. What if you were just born? Age is 0. Let's see what age 0 comes in as. So age 0 is rendered as, oh, let me fix this. I don't need that right there. 0, the number, is not truthy. It might be falsey, right? So this is not truthy. It's not true. It's not truthy. In fact, the number 0, var 0, actually qualifies as falsey. Not to be confused with the string 0, which the user provided input. So again, this is going to yield as truthy. All right, and if there's probably the empty string is one thing to get tripped up on. The number 0 is something to get tripped up on, right? Because if you were to just come across the screen here and you see the number 0 there, right? Is that a 0 number or is that a 0 string? Right now in the console, it's actually really to see. It's real easy to see because the number string, the number 0 looks like that. So the double quotes are in there. It's literally a different color. But oftentimes when you're in the middle of it and you're writing code and you're getting data passed around left and right and you're looking at the screen and you see the number 0, you know, you've already programmed yourself to know that 0 is potentially a bit value, a true or false value. That 0 in many circumstances does represent false. So you expect 0 to be false. But what you're dealing with is not 0 the number. You're dealing with, I'm going to make this one 0 string. And so 0 string is actually truthy. So that's awful, right? So that's not good. And so then that just yields some confusion. So be careful of that. Let me see here about the things that I considered as falsey. And null, we talked about those. Not a number, I'll talk to you in a second. And then naturally, let's go back to our false var. We're going to say false value so that we can see how this behaves. Good. Okay. Not truthy, right? So it's not truthy because it's clearly false. Let's do what not a number is. So what is a not a number? Let me show you what NaN. NaN is short for not a number. When does this thing come to be? Let me try to illustrate where not a number comes over here in the console. So let's just say we have an example. 0 divided by 1 is 0, right? You can have 20 divided by 8 and you get a number. But sometimes, you know, you let the user put in some information, or you might just introduce a bug yourself and you do something like 8 divided by 0, you get infinity, so that's that. But what happens if you said 8 divided by 8? Not a number. Okay. So, right, infinity. So that's an interesting, right? That's a key word. So if we did infinity, before we go on, let's just see what infinity, that value yields. Infinity is truthy, right? So it does have a value. And let's see, not a number is not truthy as falsey. So here is var not a number written out. So this is a direct pointer to the keyword. And we'll see that not a number is falsey. Hit save, and we're going to see, hey, it's not truthy. It might be falsey. But you can actually elicit that by doing some bad math. And we're going to say that there's a number that's divided by the string hello. Sometimes you end up doing that. So here's bad math. And bad math is going to come back it's not truthy, it's falsey. In fact, this is falsey. And we're going to see that the bad math number came in here. Let me move this over here for a second so you can see it. The bad math is not a number. That's how you elicit and how you get that value to come up. You have to just do bad math. Now, this is interesting, right? Because you're seeing a number. Let me demonstrate while we're here another example of type coercion. Here's the string 100. That's nice. 10 divided by 100. Okay, good. But what happens when I say 10 divided by 100, the string? It comes back as 0.1. And so what happened is that that string went through type coercion. The JavaScript engine tried to take that string and convert it into a number so that it could do the math. And here's, again, this is what this is one of, we're going to separate the JavaScript developers into two camps. The fact that this actually works is seen as a feature by one side of the camp, and it's kind of nice. And then the fact that this actually works by the other side of the camp is seen as some type of bug manifestation, evil aberration of reality. So no good. You don't have to pick a camp right now. You will inevitably end up picking a camp, and whether you love that or not, I try to be neutral in this situation, and as I try to teach people about the tools that we work with. So this is an example, and we've run down all the things that are going to be truthy and falsey in an isolated manner. Why is this important? Okay, why is this important? Let me get rid of these guys here. And then again, let me come back to say, okay, let me think out some logic with you. If, for example, I say right away, I'm going to console log Alex dot first name, right? And in fact, let me put this in a string. I'm going to put this in backticks, and I'm going to say my friend is, and what I want to say about Alex. I want to say Alex, my friend. Alex is blank, age. Okay, so that's what I want to say. My friend undefined is 50 years old. So I don't want that to print out, right? I don't want that to print out. That's not nice. I should make sure that I have a first name. The goal is that I should print out a valid message that is more like this. My friend Alex is 50 years old. And so this scenario where I didn't have a first name, or look, I'm going to put an underscore here so that I change the first name property. Alex, I don't want that. And I certainly don't want, again, I'm going to change the property name to age, to underscore age, so that I see my friend undefined is undefined years old. I don't want to do that. And then here's a worst case scenario. What if Alex is actually not an object? What if Alex is null? What we're going to get here is an error. Now, this is a beautiful error. If you want error. So these errors that come in red, oh my God, they're awesome. They're great. You got to learn how to read these errors. I got an uncut type error. I cannot read the property first name of null. I can't read the property first name of null. It's not saying that first name is null. It's saying that it can't read the property first name that belongs to this thing that is currently null. That's not cool, because this guy's null. So it's not that the first name is null. It's that the object, it's not that the first name is null, it's that the object that first name belongs to, which is this dude, Alex, is not there. Now, I could actually leave him as undefined as well, and now I'm going to get a different error that says I cannot read property first name of undefined. That's terrible. I'm going to get that error. It's the same type of error that if I basically removed Alex, a similar error, Alex is not defined, I get this type of issue, right? But I get this issue on line 51 where I'm trying to read it. I don't actually get this error earlier on in the program. I get this error right away. So here's where we start leveraging truthy and falsey. Let's clear the field here. Let's get rid of all of these values. So you might want to take a screenshot of that come back to it so you can come back and start working with those. I'm going to clear the entire screen, get rid of everything so we can see what's going on over here. I'm going to declare a variable var for my Alex type, and I'm going to say type of Alex. So when I do that, the type of Alex, when there's renders, we're going to see very conveniently that the Alex type is undefined. And this is what this is saying, Alex is not defined. I need to practice defensive programming. What is defensive programming? It means that I am essentially, what am I defending against? I'm defending against errors. I'm defending against exceptions and errors being thrown by my application so that the user or the consumer of my API has the best possible experience. So what I have to do is I have to do everything that I in my power to keep this line from erroring. And in as much as it might even include keeping that line from running. So how am I going to keep that line from running or from erroring? I have to conditionally run it. So that means that I can only run it under certain conditions. And what are those conditions going to be? I have to say, hey, if the Alex type is equal to an object. If the Alex type is equal to an object, then that means I get to do this. And you see that the Alex type is undefined, so I win. This ends up being a good way of doing it, a very explicit way of doing it, and in some circumstances, a more efficient way of doing it than what I'm about to show you. But then, because it's just more efficient. But what ends up happening is people end up doing what is the most convenient, and here's the most convenient thing to do, which for readability and for a lot of purposes, in as much as the type of operator that we're doing and using type of the way we're doing it right now might be more efficient, when you combine multiple checks like I'm going to show you right now, it ends up being, in my opinion, the better thing to do because, yes, we are concerned with the efficiency of what runs in our code, but at a certain level, pros and cons, give and take, I want to make sure that my developers are also being productive and are able to debug things as efficiently as possible. So instead of doing a type of there, what we're going to do is simply say, again, remember the type is undefined. We're going to say if Alex. So if I say if Alex, notice that it's not defined. That doesn't work out in this situation, right? So if you for some reason, right? So if you for some reason knew that this was the possibility that there wasn't an Alex anywhere, then you have to write this one. More often than not, you have Alex defined somewhere because that's why you wrote if statement. But you don't know if there's a value assigned to it. So you know that it's defined somewhere because you're not going to be writing code against something that's not defined. By the way, this error here, when you do that, and you show it the output over here, depending on the environment that you're in, you're going to be working in this environment very quickly. You're going to get an error even before you go to try to run it like I'm running it over here on the right-hand side. So this type of error that you're going to see, as long as you're working in a good development environment and a good team that's set up the proper environment with the proper rules, you shouldn't even be allowed to run stuff like this. Okay, so this error, you're going to see this. So unfortunately, you're going to see this because not everyone works in a good team. So you have to be careful if you find yourself working on a team where this is even allowed. Got to try to change that. So you being in a good team, you are going to have a variable or a parameter or something defined called Alex. In here, we are doing what amounts to is a Truthy Falsey check. Leveraging the fact that the value of undefined is Falsey. Okay. So here's Falsey, in effect, because it's not true and it's not truthy, so we are doing defensive programming and we're not going inside of there. That's great. Now, what happens now if I'm going to leverage now the type of Alex is going to be an object. The type of Alex is now going to be a valid string object. And so therefore, I go in and I try to write out my friend undefined is undefined years old. That's not cool. right? Because basically I have a friend that I don't know. The friend object, the object that I've been given, isn't necessarily in the shape, meaning it doesn't have the properties that I'm expecting it to have. So this is also not cool. So I have to also then protect against this type of output. And again, we're going to leverage now. We're going to combine the fact that we're going to use the logical operators, and we're going to leverage Truthy and Falsey. So let me show you here now the Alex type. Let's go off of the age type, alex.age, and this is probably let's see if that even flows here. The age type is going to come back as undefined, right? Because Alex does not have an age. Let's give Alex an age so that we can double check what that's going to render as over here on the right side of the graph. That the age type comes back as a number. So as long as the object Alex that has an age property here visible at the top, it will be recognized as a number. Good. Let me make sure. I'm going to take it out now. So let me demonstrate to you now how we're going to do this. Now, if this is in English, what I'm going to write in English. If I have Alex, if there's an Alex, and that Alex has an age, and that Alex has a first name. If I have an Alex, if that Alex has a name, if that Alex has a first name, all those need to be present. So there's ands in there. If I have Alex, and if Alex has an age, and Alex has a first name, then we're going to console log that. So, and you can put this on a new line. If Alex and Alex dot first name. So again, now this is leveraging the Truthy, Falsey nature of a string. If first name is a string, a non-empty string, this is going to come back true. And Alex has an age, then we're going to output this console log. And you can see here that nothing is being logged because Alex does not have an age property and it does not have a first name property because I have manipulated those property names to be something different just for convenience base, right? Now, let me make sure now the Alex object does have these. Actually, I'm going to say Alex has one property, first name. And again, nothing gets printed out because, and let me put that in the console log. I'm just going to console log unknown object. Just real simple. Unknown object. So I have an unknown object. And let's just, in case I confused it with those underscores, here's my Alex buddy. I got an unknown object, right? The age type is undefined. If I give Alex an age, it doesn't even matter what age it is. I still get an unknown object because even though I have Alex with an age, here comes Alex with an age. My conditional statements here, the expressions that I'm evaluating using the logical and say I need to have an Alex object, I need to have a first name, and I need to have an age. All of those things need to be present. Here we go. Now it's going to have, look, empty string. Let's see what happens with empty string. Empty string yields the fact that, you know what? Oh, I got to go in and log in. This is going to happen every now and then. And I have an unknown object. All right, so there's my unknown object, right? Because first name is not a valid string. And as soon as I give it something, any letter, it doesn't matter. Hey, here's my friend G, he's 2 years old. Let's go back to Alex, and he's 21. So that's all that happens. Now, I could, if I wanted to, instead of using the logical and, I could say if I have Alex, and let me put these on one line. Ooh, let me put these on one line so you can see these on one line. So all of these three conditions need to be here. I could give you a scenario where it's like, look, as long as I have Alex and I have one of these properties, then good. Let me go with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put parentheses around this expression. And now instead of, in English, instead of saying if I have Alex and if I have a first name and I have an age, what I'm going to change it to is I'm going to say if I have Alex and if Alex has a first name or an age. So if I put the or here, then what this is saying is that one of these, as long as one of these conditions is true, as long as this one is true or this one is true, that half of it, as long as one of those is true, then on the right-hand side of this ampersand, I'm going to be evaluating a true value. So var, or I'm going to be evaluating against a true, has one property. Here it is. I'm pulling that out right there so that we can look at it. So if I have one property, here's one property, has one property, and notice really interestingly enough, you see that? It returns a string Alex, okay? It returns a string Alex right now this first time around. Let me do it the second time. Now it's going to return has one property, and that one property is going to be the age, 21. In both of those scenarios, the number 21 or the string first name is going to yield a true, because a string or number yields truthy. So here's 21, right? And so look, I don't have a first name, but because I have 21 there, this part of it is truthy. So truthy because I have an object, and truthy because I have at least one property. That makes this scenario, the combined, again with the logical and, true. If I took away the age from Alex, this operation here now is going to yield and has one property, is going to come back as undefined. And because that's undefined, undefined again is known as falsey when we go through type coercion. If true, the, and falsey, okay, well that's the double ampersand there, the logical and says both of them have to be true or truthy. That means I'm not going to output my friend is Alex, etc. with no age. So I go to the line where I spit out unknown object. So leveraging these objects and their properties using type coercion to get at a truthy or falsey value is something that we do all the time. Okay. And now again, we're talking about defensive programming. We're defending against throwing exceptions. We're defending against errors. We're defending against our application blowing up. Okay. Now, why is that valid? Let me give this a different name because this is really important. What we're doing here, saying that I have to have an object called Alex, and it needs to be something that is not undefined or not null. It needs to be at least an object, something that comes back as truthy. Something I want to make sure that I have an object before I reference its properties. If I do give you the simplest version of this, I want to make sure I have an object before I reference its properties. Even though this is coming out here, this is first level null or undefined checks, affectionately called in many languages null checks, null reference checks. You want to make sure that Alex does not point to a null pointer, meaning a null pointer is a variable that points to null. It's a variable that points to nothing. In JavaScript, nothing is specifically called undefined or null. They're interchangeably. There's a slight distinction between those two, but the fact that the pointer points to no object, we can call it a null pointer or a pointer to undefined. It gets a little complicated. The point is that Alex, the variable Alex, doesn't point to an object as it does here. If I leave it alone here, if I just declare it and don't assign it a value, then what we're dealing with is that Alex is undefined. And before we do these operations, you see here, all right, because cannot read property age of undefined. Okay, if I have Alex, right? If I have Alex, so this if I have undefined, then I should not be executing this code. And right now I'm getting this error because this error here, look, let's read our error. Line 38 is actually this line because I'm accessing this variable. So let's get rid of this guy so I clear up my example and I show you the actual solution here, right? So if I'm given an object, and before I actually try to reference this object's properties, I first have to check through type coercion of trying to get to a truthy. If I have an Alex, let me access those properties. So this simple if statement here of verifying that Alex is an object before I try to access properties of that object, that is called the null check. You can write this a little bit more verbose version. So look, we have Alex is undefined. So if we say undefined, if it's not equal to undefined, let's see what happens. Again, we can do that. If Alex is not equal to undefined, this is working. Sometimes you get a scenario where you assign a null to it, and then you get that error on line 43. So depending upon your environment, you might have to say if it's not null. So you have to put those two checks in there, right? So I am checking specifically for the undefined value and for the null value. They're two distinct values in JavaScript that say the same type of thing. I am a pointer to nothing. You can do both those checks, or for convenience sake, you simply say, and you leverage the fact that undefined and null are both falsy, and you can put that null check in like that. This is what's referred to as null checks. This is a backbone of good software development. You have to learn to put these if statements. Anytime you're trying to access an object's properties, you have to check that that object is given to you, that it's not null, because sometimes that will happen. You get past null. Null is a perfectly good value for a variable parameter. Make sure that you're doing those null checks, right? So a big topic hidden inside of a truthy, a falsey scenario, the null checks, super important.